Welcome to Slayer the Alchemist in another edition of Sabbath Sunday. This is where we get together on Sundays to talk Black Sabbath related topics. And for this Sunday, we have a special guest. Joining us is John McEntee from the band Incantation. And we are going to be discussing the Born Again album, Black Sabbath's Born Again album, released in 1983, the first and only album to feature Deep Purple vocalist Ian Gillan. It's an album that kind of divides the fan base maybe a little bit. There's some people that really, really love this record. There's some people that don't care for this record. John is a very big fan of Born Again. Darren and I, we both like Born Again, although we see some of its flaws. You can hear Darren and I going into in-depth discussion on Born Again on our podcast, Into the Void, a Black Sabbath podcast. I'll leave a link for that below. I'll also leave a link to John's band. So Born Again, 1983, Ian Gillan comes in from Deep Purple. I think where fans sometimes get divided on this record is they can't accept Ian Gillan in Black Sabbath. It's just too foreign of a sound for them. And the other big thing is the mix of this album. The mix is something that has gone down in like folklore history, heavy metal history or something. Nobody knows, even the guys in the band don't quite know how this album turned out sounding the way that it has, but it has definitely if you're a fan of the record, it's got a lot of atmosphere. If you're not a fan of the album's mix, it's muddy and it's, you can't hear anything and that. But it's to be said that over the years, this album has developed quite a cult following, and there is quite a fan base around it. And it's an album that always sparks interesting discussions when you're hanging out with Black Sabbath fans and the beers start flowing late at night. It's always Born Again is one of those records that people have opinions on. So let's get into it. John, thanks for joining us here on Sabbath Sunday, and talk to us about Born Again. What are your early memories of it? What are your thoughts of it?
Well, first I want to bring up the fact that I know last time I was on here, I think sometimes my passion for, Black Sabbath and just music in general sometimes comes across a little overbearing, and I'm trying not to be accusing, not so much as I'm very passionate about music, especially Black Sabbath and those albums that really mean a lot to me. So it's not like I'm trying to discount other people's opinions, because obviously music is subjective and people get different things out of it, and they come from different places and everything. So I just wanted to get that across. I really think I just don't want you to think that I was trying to attack in a negative way, but trying to be more positive, just trying to get my point across, of the situation. And I sometimes get a little bit over passionate, we'll say, but maybe that's what's fun about it.
That's what this is, Sabbath Sunday. It's passionate Black Sabbath fans getting together. That's what makes this fun. We all, we grew up with these records, and especially an album like Born Again. This one hit, for me, I was 13 at the time. You guys I know around the same age, so it hit right at a certain time. And yeah, we're passionate about this stuff because Black Sabbath is our favorite band. We grew up with this. It's an albums that have changed the musical wires and DNA inside our brains. So that's what's fun about this.
I think I used to be more aggressive with my opinions of Black Sabbath and certain albums, favoring certain albums and not liking other albums and getting into arguments. But anymore, it's like I'm just glad that people are into Black Sabbath, and I like when people are into the Tony Martin era just as much as the Ozzy or the Dio era. It's cool, and I wish people could come together a little bit more and be more accepting of the thing as a whole. It's always like, well, a Tony Martin era, Headless Cross is the best Black Sabbath album. Well, maybe, but maybe not. But does it matter? It's like, and people get that way about Born Again too, and it almost makes people that are on the fence or maybe not as big a fan of that album hate it more when somebody comes at them and says, this is the best Black Sabbath album. And the person who you're saying it to, or who that person is saying it to, maybe like, well, it's not my favorite, but it's not bad. And no, you're wrong. It's the best. And it's like, well,
That's a
now I
neo
hate it.
elitist
You know, I mean,
attitude.
you're forcing it on me. So, I mean, the whole key to everything is, to all of this, is that, we all like Black Sabbath. Some of us have certain albums that mean more than others, and it's all good because we all like the same band. But likewise, I mean, I have a fondness for Technical Ecstasy. That's like my pet album. And one of the reasons that I'm fond of it, I feel like there's so many people that dislike it. I feel like it draws me even closer to that album, and I think people
You get protective of it, yeah.
a little bit, yeah. So I get where you're coming from with Born Again, For anybody
Don't mess with my baby.
a little bit, yeah. I mean, if you've invested that much time, and I think we all have invested that much time, being a fan of a band, then it becomes an emotional investment, it becomes emotional attachment, strange as that seems. And when somebody comes in and attacks something that you've spent years nurturing, listening to the music, buying the records, buying the t-shirts, posters, whatever, you can't help sometimes but take it personally. So to what you said, John, I get it. I mean, even if I didn't take offense to anything about that last the Live Evil thing. I thought it was cool. I thought we were having a spirited discussion. And I thought each of us got really good, valid points across. So, no, it's all good as far as I'm concerned.
You know what happens though? Almost Born Again has almost the reverse effect of what you were just saying, Darren, where people swoop in and say, oh, this is the best Black Sabbath album. Born Again is almost the opposite, where people will say, oh, this album, no, you don't want to get this one, it sounds bad, this, that, and another thing. And we talked about this in the podcast. When I was 13 years old, I wasn't reading any metal magazines. This was way before the internet. So whenever I listened to anything, whether it be Never Say Die, Born Again, I had no friends that listened to Black Sabbath. I was taking it as a complete blank slate. I didn't know any of the story. I didn't know any of the history. Unfortunately, now, if a young kid is just getting into Black Sabbath and they Google Born Again, you're going to read all kinds of crazy stuff. You're going to read how it's this weird record with Ian Gillan from Deep Purple, Deep Sabbath, and the mix is really bizarre, and the album cover is made Ian Gillan vomit when he saw it. As a kid, I just got things, and I was a blank slate. I just made 100% my own decisions on these records. I was influenced by no one, nothing, and that's something I sort of long for at times, that
Yeah.
world where you were able to just take things and they were just completely new and fresh to you. It's almost impossible to do that now with the internet, and Born Again was like that for me. I took it in. It was a new Black Sabbath record. I was excited about it, and I just took it for what it was and formed my own opinions. Now, 30, 40 years later, with people going on and on and on the internet about Born Again or Seventh Star or Never Say Die and all these things, and these albums get these stories and everything that are attached to them that are sometimes hard to shake. And I feel bad for people that are just getting into Sabbath because they might be like, oh, Technical Ecstasy or Never Say Die. Everybody says those are no good. And you're walking into those records with those preconceived thoughts already planted into your head.
But I'm not sure that Born Again is that album. More often, our experiences with this in a social context may be different, but most of the discourse I see regarding Born Again is people like they don't just like it, they love it. I mean, it's a big, like I said, when we referenced when we were doing our podcast, it's almost like a cult like following of this album. And I don't share in that. I like the album, but there's things that bother me about it. But I think overall the songs are good, and I enjoy listening to it. But there are people that are really pretty passionate about it, and I think a lot of it has to do with when they got into Black Sabbath. It was probably about the time that album came out, and I think that, at least I know a lot of people my age, I was maybe a year or two prior to that, or as far as really getting into Black Sabbath and really being a fan. And a lot of it, I was more into Ozzy, and then got into the Dio era, and then when Born Again came out, I had just pretty much warmed up to the Dio era, and Born Again came out, and as a follow up to Mob Rules, I was let down. But and there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, the production primarily being the main reason, but I mean, there was just a whole different animals, different vibe, and it's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around. But having like what's it been out for like 35 years now, almost 40 years. I mean, I've gotten used to it, and it is a good record. Some of the things that people cherish about it happened accidentally with the mix. It's strange how the album landed where it did. We had Tony Iommi producing with Robin Black, who also did Sabotage and Technical Ecstasy. Yet this album sounds so completely different from both those albums. But the way that it sounds lends itself to this dark, heavy, almost demonic vibe. And I think that's one of the things that's probably been the biggest takeaway for people is how dark and how representative this album kind of is for the Black Sabbath concept. And I get that. So, I over time I've warmed up to it, and I've become more accepting of it, because I sort of tried to, well, I want to like it, and there's a lot of things to like about it. And so when you open yourself up to being more accepting, you start to like, be more receptive of some of the things that maybe you didn't quite catch on to the first few times you listen to it, or the first 100 times you listen to it. So, that's pretty much where I am at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as my introduction to Sabbath, I'm kind of where John is with this, is that was the first Sabbath album that I was anticipating. I think it's hard to remember exactly, but I think I knew it was coming out, or it was like new on the shelf coming out when I went to, I want to say I seen it in like Kmart or something. I don't know if Kmart didn't even want to sell it, but I somehow remember seeing it at Kmart, going with my mom shopping, and just like, holy crap, and just looking at this album, and just, I thought the cover was great. I thought it was just exactly what I wanted from Black Sabbath. It was just, it looked evil. I mean, the evil baby, I thought was great. I don't know. I just loved it. I loved the way the logo looked. I loved the way the whole vibe of the album. I even like that weird thing that Ian Gillan's wearing on the back. It looks like some kind of drape or something like that over. I guess not in that picture, but the other picture, it's like he's wearing like this, almost like what your mom would wear, like, in like one of those house dresses or whatever,
I think it's a poncho.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think so.
But anyway, just the whole vibe. I mean, just the way that they looked, it just spoke to me as a young metalhead. At the time that came out, I was just kind of dipping my toe into a little more extreme stuff. I was hearing about, the Venoms and the, I don't know, just Anvils, or just stuff that was a little more underground than, the Judas Priests and Iron Maidens and stuff like that. So it just totally spoke to me as like, I mean, I had a preconceived notion that this is going to be the most evil record I ever own. Like I just felt, it just spoke to me as I don't know, it's probably probably 12 or 13-year-old kid. Cause it came out 83, right? So yeah, it must've been 12 or 13 or something. So it was just right in my pocket. And I just remember listening to it for the first time, and just, I tried to put myself back in that mind frame, and it just sounded evil, the album, everything. I thought, Trash sound was, I mean, you guys didn't really like Trash, but I thought it's a great song. I love the vibe of that song. Ian Gillan screams in that song, that middle scream is perfect. I mean, it's just, that scream going into guitar solo, it's, for a 13-year-old kid is like one of the coolest things ever. And just the whole vibe of that. I mean, the whole album, I know you guys were saying that you didn't really like the intro, the dark right before, Disturbing the Priest was too soon into the record. For me as a kid, it just totally just got me in the vibe. Like, I just felt something evil was happening. I mean, if I do have to complain, yeah, maybe 2 intros on side 1 is a little much, but at the same time, at that time, it just sounded like, well, this band's so damn evil that they have to have these intros to these songs, because these songs are so incredibly like dark that it's just, it just fit for me. It set the whole mood as a young kid. I mean, the first time listening to a song like Disturbing the Priest, and I was just like, holy hell, it's like I didn't even know what was going on. Like, I didn't know enough about guitar to understand what it is. I'm just hearing all these heavy sounds and these weird things going on and these harmonics going in the song and these evil vocals. And I'm just listening to it as like, it's almost like a stew of just evil sludge hitting me. Really, And I mean, especially as a young kid, I mean, that's, really shapes me. I mean, I was listening to some Sabbath. I don't know. I can't remember if it was. I want to say I had probably like Live Evil and the best of Sabbath or whatever. And to me, this was like darker and eviler than both of those. It was like they progressed into that evil band that I wanted as, a young kid and whatnot. So it holds such a special place to me. I mean, songs like Zero the Hero, it's just so twisted, and those, that riff going around in circles, it's like mesmerizing. And just as a kid hearing that, and I mean, I think the drum work in that is just amazing. The way that song is, it didn't sound like anything I heard. I mean, yeah, song Trash sounds like, okay, I've heard something like that before. I've heard, I've heard, Highway Star or something where you can say it has that, or maybe what, Neon Night or something with that vibe. But songs like Disturbing the Priest, never heard anything like that even existed before that, which is some of the magic of Tony Iommi looking back on it, but at that time I'm just hearing it like, what is going on here, and then hearing, like I said, Zero the Hero was another one. Though, I mean, that first side of that album is so hit me like a ton of bricks, where it was just like, I'm listening to something that's just completely different, completely darker than anything I've heard, to that point. And, just briefly, say going to the second side of it was actually more of the side of, okay, stuff is a little more organized, a little more, say, not quite as dark, and a little more song oriented, I guess. Like, just like I was able to just, okay, Digital Bitch, I thought all the songs are great. I can't say I don't like any song on the album, but I guess side 1 sounded more like an experiment in just the most evil thing I ever heard in my life, and side 2 kind of sounded like, Black Sabbath, maybe closer to the few things that I've heard before. And to be fair, I'm going into this record without a huge amount of knowledge of Black Sabbath. I've only know, the best of, I know the old stuff, from Live Evil and the best of album. And, I can't remember for sure, how much of the Dio stuff I heard, but I like the Dio stuff. But to me, I actually thought this was more in my area of what I liked musically than the Dio stuff at that time. I liked the Dio stuff I heard. I thought it was good, but this was just like, you just felt like you're being, a juvenile delinquent listening to this. Like, this is really the, you know, like, it just, you know, I'm going to scare all my friends listening to this album, you know, which it, you know, I think has that vibe. But yeah, so it's like that early impression, it's always stuck with me. And it is like every time I listen to it, I just feel like, yes, you know, like this is, it just, it's like everything that is to me great about Black Sabbath is in this album. And I'll get to that point more later on, because I do think that this album has a lot of most, you know, of all the eras prior to it, pretty much covered throughout the album, just in different ways. I know that some people, you know, say don't like the production on the album. I mean, as a kid, I just thought it sounded evil as hell. How the hell do I care if I could hear, you know, this little thing going on here, that thing, as long as it's evil and sounds cool, I'm happy with it. Listening back to it though, I think I must have listened to the album so many times that I don't even, the production does not even come into play as an issue at all. Like, I've listened to it so much. I know, you know, everything that's going on pretty much on the album. I've, I don't feel like, I don't feel like the production is lacking. I know it's not the same tone that you hear in the first, you know, say 4 or 6 or whatever Black Sabbath albums, but there's still a attack on those that guitar tone to me that just sounds like it's him really trying to push the limits of, say, a more attack to his sound and make a more of an aggressive sound to the album, almost like he was trying to say, like, this is Black Sabbath for the 80s, you know, we're gonna be head and shoulders above, say, the other stuff that's out there. It's going to be more of a viciousness to the Black Sabbath almost. It's, at least to me, it had that vibe to it in the guitar tone. Like, when I, like, for me, when I hear songs like Trashed, I just the way that it just comes across to me heavy. I know there's keyboards in there you're mentioning that you think softens it up. But for me, I think it's totally fine. I love the way the guitar and the keyboards work together. And I mean, that song, when that song is on, it's just like headbanging mania for me. It's just like a dream come true. I mean, my worst, you know, metal fumble probably ever was that I missed them when they played on that tour, because I was too dumb to not know that they were even playing until after one of my friends came into school with a Black Sabbath and Quiet Riot bootleg shirt, and I was just like so pissed because, you know, this is my favorite album and I missed them on this tour. But I wasn't worried about it, because I thought, okay, well, they're going to come back because it's such a great thing, and it was impossible. Then I got you know, then I heard about the Deep Purple thing and it ruined my hopes, even though I like Perfect Strangers. It's a great album, but, you know, I mean, honestly, to get another Black Sabbath album with Ian Gillan trumps Perfect Strangers, even though Perfect Strangers is an amazing album. You know, the things that could be done with that caliber of firepower of having you know, Ian Gillan singing for Black Sabbath. I mean, that was another thing, because I was just getting into Deep Purple too. I had Deep Purple's Deepest Purple tape, and, you know, I liked it, but I was just like, this is like a little bit too soft for me, you know, like there's a little too many keyboard solos. At that time, I wanted to hear a little more guitar stuff. Like, I liked like Somewhere in Time, because he was screaming, you know, and that's what I wanted to hear. And then to get Black Sabbath Born Again, I mean, you get screaming up the wazoo, and it's like amazing. I mean, when Ian Gillan is in top shape screaming, there's some of the most evil, haunting screams probably in rock and metal.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's
You know, and
really
I would say this about the mix. And this came to me today. I saw a clip of The Godfather on YouTube, and it was one of these scenes where they're in a room talking, and it is so dark through that whole movie. So
yeah,
many of those scenes in that movie are so not lit, by today's standards, no one would film a movie like that dark
Yeah.
dialogue going. And I thought to myself, you know what, this is kind of like Born Again. If you were to brighten up Born Again, just like if you were to brighten up The Godfather, all those scenes where they're talking, it would seem really weird. Like that's part of the thing about that movie, The Godfather, is that when people are talking, their faces are shadowed. Just the whole room is like, it's always dark, it seems. Whenever they're inside scheming and talking about what they're going to do next, it's always dark. And this album is kind of the same way. Like it has this claustrophobic, kind of cloudy, engulfing you kind of sound to it. And if you were to take that away and give it some, because you know they're talking about remixing this record, give it like a bright modern remix, I think it would, it could really go wrong. And I know what you're saying about how as a kid there was a real dark vibe to this record, and it was things like Stonehenge in the dark and just the whole overall muddy, like dark nature of this album. This was not, you know, I was listening to, I guess Maiden would have been on Number of the Beast or Peace of Mind at this point. And those albums were real Priest's British Steel. It's real metallic and shiny. You know, Born Again is
this
really
was a mean
like,
album.
Born Again is like a cloudy English winter day, drizzling winter day, you know, in a cemetery.
It's like The Fog.
All that is true. And the thing about, so there's a couple things to talk about. So if someone's going to remix it, this album has such a long-standing tradition of sounding the way that it sounds. It would be difficult to hear it in optimum clarity, and it would take a lot of the personality away from the album at this point. And when John, when you're describing the scene from The Godfather, you can be sure. Who was it that was it Scorsese? Who directed The Godfather? Okay, so anyway,
I don't know offhand.
That scene was intentional. The lighting was it was in such a way where it was conceptual. The thing about this album is that it kind of happened accidentally, and it's like it's if somebody is like looking at a photograph and eating chocolate cake and accidentally smears chocolate on the photograph and then puts it aside, and then someone else picks it up and looks at it and says, "Oh my God, this is incredible." That chocolate smudge, it gives it so much more atmosphere. And then the person who put chocolate smudge on, it's like, yeah, I guess so. Sure, why not?
But I mean, it's one of those.
Iommi, and I don't mean to diminish it. And you know, I mean that was kind of a bad example maybe. But when Tony Iommi said that he was surprised, and not in a good way, when he heard the album, is the way that it turned out. It's like, well, wait a minute, why was there no artistic control over this thing? I mean, why was it to the surprise of the band that it came out as murky and muddy as it did? It just was strange. So, but there it is, and there it was, and that's how it came out, and that's how it was presented to everybody. So you either liked it or you didn't, and if you didn't, you had no choice but to get used to it or just put it aside altogether. But if you liked Black Sabbath and you really wanted to get into the music, because the music was good, and there's Tony playing guitar, and you've got Tony's guitar tone and everything you said about Ian Gillan's voice, that's totally on point. The shrieks, the wailing, it just builds into this ominous, evil, dark sound. But it's like, for me, with the production, it's really frustrating, because I mean, even as a kid, so I was 14, but I didn't know anything about production. I didn't know, the snare drum, it doesn't quite cut through in the mix well enough. I didn't care about that. But what I did care about was being able to hear everything that it didn't sound like it was underneath a wet blanket. It's almost like you have something that you could hear is effective, and it's heavy, and it's good. And then you throw a blanket over it, and it's like, but I wish I could just hear that a little bit more clear. And yes, it does build into an atmosphere, and I guess for some people that's a good thing, but I think that there's a lot going on. Like I'd love to be able to hear Bill's drums a little bit clearer.
Yeah.
Bill has said that he was really proud of his performance. So I mean, I can barely discern the snare drum in this
I
mix.
don't know. I don't have a problem at all with the drum sound on the album or Bill Ward's playing. I think his playing is genius on that album. I mean,
I'm sure it
it's
is. I can't hear it though.
it
I mean, that's
brings
the thing.
back it to me. It brings back like it's like the 70s Black Sabbath drum style on a lot of those songs, I think, where it has that percussion type sound more than anything else. And it just, I think, I mean, it's crazy, but I think it's some of Bill's best work drum wise, in my opinion. I just love the drumming on an album is so good. And it's weird because I seem like I could hear it plain as day. And I just think it was just so nice to have, even though I love Vinny Appice, I thought it was so nice to have Bill Ward, Geezer Butler, and Tony Iommi and get some of that 70s vibe into it, but still pushing it into an 80s type album, because that's really what it is. But I think there's so many points on that album where if you could, if you would listen to it, say on a I don't know, a volume 4 mix or even a technical ecstasy type mix or something like that, that those songs would fit in there almost no problem. I mean, of course, Ian Gillan's voice is a lot different, but actually riff wise, when you're going to it, it reminds me more of mid-era Black Sabbath with an edge to it, a purpose edge and a lot of originality, because it's like he almost goes backwards with his style, but also going forward at the same time and doing stuff that he never did before. And that's one of the things that I love about the album, is because I mean, I didn't know that at the time, but listening to it over and over again and knowing the back catalog like the back of my hand now, it's like you listen to it, you're like, oh, that totally is a total 70s vibe on that part, and that's great, but it's a total 70s vibe. But to me, it's darker than the 70s vibe. It's like, it's not quite as, we'll say, clear as the 70s vibe, but to me, sometimes having that murk in there is actually a positive to that. And what I wanted to say too about the overall sound, which he said is kind of muffled and stuff, it's one of those things where it's like the fog, and when the fog gets you, you're stuck in it and you just absorb it, you get it. And it's like, if you escape the fog, maybe you don't get it. Because for me, it's like, I mean, I've heard the rough mixes, I've heard the version that Ian Gillan did on his solo album, which is a little rough on the, the trashed version, on that. But I mean, that darkness in that, like I said, being stuck in that vibe of that whole album, if you almost like listening to it as a, yeah, I guess it's just more of a vibe. If you get into that vibe and you are able to fall into it, to me, it seems like it just sucks you in and you can enjoy it. But, obviously, if you're going into it, if you're expecting to hear it sound like Mob Rules or I don't know, whatever album, volume 4 or something. I mean, I think, in my opinion, it would take away from the album more, because it's almost like those songs to me were meant to be kind of more mysterious sounding, even though they still have the doom aspect and the kind of the hard rock aspect to it. There's also it's definitely a lot more keyboards, like you were talking, it has like those weird little, I don't know, those little bass fucking bubble up things or whatever. I mean, those things are genius. I love, every time you hear one of them, it just brings that murky. It's like, it's supposed to be murky. It's like things are bubbling up. It's so murky, the mix of the
Zero to
album.
Hero. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Zero to Hero. Yeah. I mean, it just, and getting off track a little bit, Zero to Hero live, hearing Ian Gillan do those screams throughout the whole song too, those extra screams, it's just a dream come true. I wish I was there to see that in person. And that it just, anyway, but yeah, so, but Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying about the, basically I look at it, it's like a fog. You either get it or you don't get it. And I understand that people, don't get it. And I don't know how, in my opinion, how anyone could be like bummed out that Ian Gillan is doing vocals for Black Sabbath. I mean, that's almost like the dream team ever, in my opinion. I know it was kind of marketed that way, and maybe some people didn't think it was, but for me, it was like, no, that's perfect. I mean, I would take Ian Gillan singing on almost any Black Sabbath album. I mean, all live stuff I've heard, even though he doesn't know all lyrics and he screws things up, his versions of all the songs are great. I love his version of Black Sabbath. It's like he screams and just doing whatever, and heaven and hell, making up lyrics and just going. But it sounds so. That whole thing. There's something about it that is just that they were so. Maybe I liked it because it was so metal. It was so metal when you heard that version of those songs. I mean, I as you can see, I'm a freak about Born Again. I have a lot of bootlegs from that tour. I've heard all these different live shows, and I just love hearing those versions because it just seems more metal, a little less rock. And as a kid, I liked hard rock, but as you can see, I'm a death metal dude. I was looking for things more heavier, so that was right in my perfect wheel well. It was almost like it was setting me up for listening to, I don't know, bands like Slayer and Possessed and whatever else, at that time. It was like getting me used to like not being so worried about these minutiae as far as like production wise, and going on the overall vibe from the album from beginning to end. Because really a lot of the stuff at that time I was listening to, like Venom or whatever, you don't listen to it for the talent, you listen to it because you like the vibe and it's catchy, and you're feeling the thing going through. And that's kind of where Born Again kind of, I think it resonates a lot with a lot of death metal and say black metal musicians, is the fact that it is an atmospheric and also just a moody, muddy album.
It's funny that you mentioned Venom, because Born Again reminds me a lot of the production of black metal. Black metal has a very muffled quality to it, and that became the charm of the album. But you just kind of knew that it was probably for lack of a bigger budget. Like if they really had more money, it would have sounded different. And the only thing that kind of with Born Again, when you're talking about the virtues of the way that it sounds, and how you have to accept it, and you have to have the vision to see the whole package artistically and how it comes together. Totally get that. The only thing that kind of diminishes that is the fact that it wasn't intentional. The band didn't. There was no.
Yeah, but I don't care if it was intentional. I'm just happy it happened.
Yeah, well,
happy accident.
Yes, sometimes the best things are accidents.
Yeah, but I mean, when the band themselves say, we have no idea how it happened, we don't like it, and it wasn't what we had intended to put out there, but there it is, and we moved on from that.
I got a question with that though. That one point, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that point that they didn't like it. See, I didn't know anything about them not liking it until I don't even know when, but it was like, I was so invested in the album before I knew they supposedly didn't like it. I think I might've been like one of the reissues or something, like almost like around 2000s or something. I can't remember, but I think that, I don't know if that's necessarily true or not. I mean, were they saying it immediately afterwards? Maybe Ian Gillan didn't like it because that was maybe more harsh than anything he's done before, but I don't really know. I mean, maybe that, at that time, were they immediately saying, oh, we don't like the way this album sounds, it sounds like shit or whatever?
Probably not. They were probably doing what every band does and go, this is the greatest album we've ever recorded. It's the
I don't
think every band does.
I think it was down the line when this happened.
There wasn't a lot of press after the fact, because they pretty much finished the album, went immediately on tour.
Yeah.
And then they finished the tour, and then Gillan was called in to do Deep Purple. So there wasn't a lot of post album wrap up. There weren't a lot of, I mean, from what I can recall, and I was reading Krang and, Circus, whatever, Hit Parader. In fact, the way I became aware of Ian Gillan joining Black Sabbath was before the album came out, I saw there was an issue of Hit Parader and it had a half-page picture of Ian Gillan, and above his head it said Black Sabbath. Gillan joins Black Sabbath, and it talked about the album. And he was all into it. He was like, I'm a member of Black Sabbath now. These are going to, the best days lie ahead. All four of us are together in this, and it sounded really promising. To your point about, did that matter at the time the album came out, whether or not it was after the fact that the band said they didn't like it? Yeah, but
everyone could do that.
For me, I mean, just listening to it, and I remember when I got the album, and I thought the album cover was cool. I liked the color scheme. I saw it on the wall. It was exciting. I went and I took